In the quiet town of Milford, nestled between dense forests and winding rivers, everyone knew each other by name. It was the kind of place where kids played in the streets until dusk, and doors were rarely locked. But on the evening of March 12, 2011, that sense of security was shattered forever. Eleanor Brooks, a retired schoolteacher known for her homemade pies and Sunday knitting circles, didn't show up for her usual morning walk. Her neighbor, Harold Miller, found it odd. Eleanor never missed a day. Around 9 a.m., he knocked on her door. No answer. The mailbox was overflowing. He decided to call the police. When officers arrived, they forced open the back door. The kitchen lights were on, a teapot still warm on the stove. But Eleanor was nowhere to be seen until they entered the living room. There, beneath the window drapes, they found her body, slumped against the wall, a knitting needle clutched in her hand. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no valuables missing, just Eleanor, and a single muddy footprint leading out the back. Detective Claire Monroe was brought in to handle the case, a recent transfer from the city. She quickly realized something Milford hadn't faced before. This wasn't random, it was personal. As word of Eleanor's death spread, fear crept into the hearts of the townsfolk. Who could have done this, and why? The answer, it turned out, would shake Milford to its core. Detective Claire Monroe stood in the dimly lit hallway of the Baxter residence, eyes scanning every detail. The scene was calm, too calm. No broken windows, no forced locks. Whoever had entered, they were expected. The victim, Henry Baxter, a retired accountant, had been found slumped over his desk, a single wound to the back of the head. But what caught Claire's attention wasn't the body. It was what was missing. Henry's laptop, usually in plain sight, was gone, and in its place, a single red playing card, the Queen of Hearts, left neatly on the desk. It didn't feel like a robbery. It felt like a message. Downstairs, officers canvassed the neighborhood. Most described Henry as quiet, polite, a creature of routine. But whispers about his personal life began to emerge. A recent inheritance, arguments with his brother, Kyle, and a woman, Marissa Lowe, who'd been seen visiting more frequently than expected. Claire turned her attention to the footprints in the hallway. Small, narrow, too small for Henry or his brother. They led to the back door and vanished into the garden. Then came a break. A neighbor's security camera caught a shadowy figure leaving the house the night before, wearing gloves and a long coat, head low. The timestamp matched the estimated time of death. Claire had suspects, but not yet the truth. In a town like Belridge, secrets don't stay buried, and whoever left that card wanted to be found. After the murder of Henry Baxter, the town of Belridge slowly turned inward. Whispers replaced greetings, and the once warm streets grew colder with suspicion. Henry's niece, Lily, stopped coming to the library where she used to volunteer. People crossed the street when they saw her. She was family, close enough to be questioned, close enough to be feared. Detective Claire Monroe knew this feeling well. In her experience, guilt rarely wore an obvious face. It hid in shadows, behind manipulated evidence and half-told stories. So she started digging, this time not just into Henry's life, but Lily's. What she found was unexpected. Just 2 weeks before the murder, Henry had updated his will, removing Lily as the primary beneficiary and naming a local nonprofit instead. The motive? Unknown. The reason? Buried somewhere in their last few interactions. Claire ordered a digital forensic sweep. In Henry's deleted emails, they found one that stood out. A message from an unknown sender, warning Henry to keep quiet or face the consequences. It had no traceable metadata. Professional. Then came the twist. Security footage from a nearby cafe showed Lily at the time of the murder, establishing an alibi. But even more chilling, the footage also captured a familiar figure walking past. Mason Doyle, a former cybercrime consultant, and Lily's ex-boyfriend. Suddenly, Claire's case cracked open. If the footage from Henry Street was tampered with, someone with Mason's skills could easily do it, and someone with a grudge could use it to frame Lily or protect her. The deeper Claire looked, the clearer it became. This murder wasn't about money. It was about betrayal. And in Belridge, betrayal runs deep. As the pieces of the Baxter case started coming together, Detective Claire Monroe found herself at a crossroad. Everything up to this point painted Mason Doyle, the cyber expert and ex-boyfriend, as the obvious suspect. But Claire had learned one thing from years in homicide. When things line up too perfectly, they rarely are. The altered footage, the planted evidence, the playing card. It all felt like a setup, designed not just to mislead, but to manipulate the investigation. Claire knew she had to dig deeper. With help from the department's cybercrime unit, she had the surveillance footage reanalyzed, frame by frame. It took hours, but the effort paid off. Subtle inconsistencies in lighting and shadows revealed the truth. Key moments had been stitched in from different days. The timeline was a lie. Someone had the tools, the skill, and most importantly, the motive to orchestrate it. But who? That's when Claire's team discovered a wire transfer, $50,000. moving from Henry Baxter's account just 3 days before the murder. The recipient, a man named Marcus Leach, a former tech consultant with ties to offshore shell companies, and, interestingly, an old associate of Mason Doyle. It wasn't Mason who framed himself. Someone was using his history, his skills, and his past connection to Lily to redirect attention. Claire realized this wasn't a simple revenge plot. It was blackmail, possibly even extortion. And somewhere in that twisted web, Henry Baxter had become expendable. Now, Claire wasn't just solving a murder. She was untangling a conspiracy. And the truth, it was darker than she had ever imagined. Detective Claire Monroe thought she'd seen it all, until the Harper case. It began as a tragic domestic homicide. Emily Harper, a beloved local teacher, found dead in her own kitchen. Her husband, Brian Harper, became the immediate suspect. They had a rocky past, financial problems, and a quiet neighborhood full of rumors. But as Claire dug deeper, something didn't add up. A forensic audit revealed that just 2 weeks before her death, Emily transferred $75,000 to an offshore account registered under the alias Victor Lane, a name with no connection to her or Brian. Curious, Claire traced the alias. Victor Lane turned out to be a cover used by Dominic Crane, a former classmate of Emily's with a violent record and ties to underground syndicates. They had history, a brief relationship that ended badly years ago, right before Dominic was arrested for fraud and illegal arms deals. Now, he was back in town, and he'd been seen outside the Harper home 3 days before Emily's murder. It was no coincidence. Claire placed Dominic under surveillance, and when they finally brought him in for questioning, he didn't flinch. Cool, smug, and unreadable. He denied everything, even smirked as if daring them to prove it. Then came the breakthrough. One of Dominic's former associates, arrested in a separate case, flipped. He revealed that Dominic had been planning to settle a score, blaming Emily for the betrayal that led to his downfall years ago, and the murder hired out, executed by a ghost operative known only as Redgate. Claire realized this wasn't a crime of passion. It was revenge, calculated, precise, and designed to destroy not just Emily, but everything she built. And the real story, it was only just the beginning. Detective Claire Monroe finally had the missing link. A deep dive into Dominic Crane's phone revealed a string of encrypted messages, each one darker than the last. Hidden beneath layers of code, Claire found direct communication with Redgate, the contract killer behind Emily Harper's death. The messages were chilling, precise instructions, payment confirmations, a timeline that aligned perfectly with the night of the murder. Claire acted fast. A joint task force was launched. Within 48 hours, Redgate, real name Marcus Lowell, was tracked to an isolated cabin miles outside the city. Armed and ready to run, he was taken into custody after a tense standoff. At first, Marcus refused to speak, but when confronted with the messages, bank transfers, and eyewitness accounts, the silence broke. He confessed, not just to the murder, but to everything. Dominic Crane had orchestrated it all. The video manipulation, the planted evidence, the plan to destroy Brian Harper's life. For Dominic, it was never about money. It was vengeance, pure and personal. A cold, calculated unraveling of a woman who he believed ruined his life, and a husband who, in his mind, didn't deserve hers. With the confession, the case was sealed. Dominic was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, manipulation of evidence, and attempted framing of an innocent man. His arrogance faded the moment the cuffs clicked shut. As for Brian Harper, he was finally exonerated, but freedom came with a price. His reputation, his peace, shattered by lies. Haywood Falls would never forget, and neither would Claire Monroe, because some cases don't just test your skills, they test your soul. When the trial ended and the headlines faded, silence returned to Marlowe Street, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet. Brian Harper was finally free, his name cleared. But the weight of suspicion, the months of whispers, the stares, all of it left scars no court ruling could erase. His daughter, Lily, clung to him tighter now. She had grown up too fast, forced to face the cruelty of a world that once seemed safe. Neighbors, once friends, avoided eye contact. Their apologies came in half-hearted waves, some too proud to admit they were wrong, others simply ashamed. Brian packed his belongings and put the house up for sale. It was no longer home, just a reminder of everything he'd lost. Detective Claire Monroe stood on the sidewalk as the moving truck pulled away. For her, this case would never be just another file closed. It was a reminder of how truth can be buried beneath appearances, and how justice often comes at a human cost. Marcus Lowell, the hitman, would spend the next 25 years behind bars. Dominic Crane, the mastermind, would never see the outside of a prison again. But it wasn't victory that filled Claire's chest. It was something heavier. She thought about how easily the town had turned against Brian, how quickly facts had been replaced by rumors, and how, even in a town like Grey Ridge, calm, tidy, quiet, the darkest storms sometimes gather behind closed doors. Life slowly resumed, but Grey Ridge had changed. People locked their doors earlier, looked a little closer at their neighbors, and whispered less, because they finally understood. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles from across the street.